Hey there, superstars. I'm Coach Keren Eldad. I'm a personal and executive coach. And every year since launching this business in late 2016, I have presented you with a list of my top books of the year. And this year is going to be no different. In fact, 2020, I think, has given us ample extra time to read if we have been so fortunate as to be able to do that. And I want to talk to you today about the top 7 books that were absolutely awesome for me and for many of my clients this year that I could not recommend more. I'm going to start with an honorary mention that I've already mentioned here before, simply because even though it wasn't printed in 2020, it came out before this, it has served me immensely well this year. And that's Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Dare to Lead is the book that keeps on giving. I believe that this is her magnum opus. In many, many books in her repertoire, nothing has hit me quite as hard as Dare to Lead, possibly because it relates to the executive side or to the running a business or to superstardom and overachievers in particular with regards to vulnerability and empathy. However, it is an exceptional book and very, very useful. You can see that my own copy is dog-eared within an inch of its life. I've also underlined several sections. I cannot recommend this enough. The second book I recommend is actually a book that I was gifted by a beloved client of mine, Nicole Hurd, whom I love so much, right after I developed a mild obsession with the Netflix special that first aired on ESPN, The Last Dance. It was the story of the 90s Chicago Bulls, and in particular of Michael Jordan and of his coach, Phil Jackson, the most successful coach in the history of the NBA. I say this arguably because other people have other opinions. I'm just basing this on number of wins. So she gave me this book, 11 Rings by Phil Jackson. And this is a book about team spirit. It's about how to form teamwork in general, how to become an epic coach that brings out the best in people so that they can work together. I absolutely loved it. I don't know anything about basketball to this day, but I do know one thing. I love Phil Jackson, and I agree with him on a lot. Speaking of figures that you may or may not agree with, I also enjoyed Barack Obama's A Promised Land. Now, this one took me a very long time to read. I am a fast reader, and this was too dense to skim through and very heavy to digest. So here you go. That's a disclaimer. This is a big book. But if you are interested in the inner workings of government, in seeing the ups and the downs, in understanding what goes on behind the scenes of a president's and presidential candidate's life, it is certainly worth your while. Not to mention, is his prose worth your while? I very much enjoyed this, and I hope you will too. Speaking of leadership that is conscious, I also loved Conscious Leadership by John Mackey with the help of Steve McIntosh and Carter Phipps. They wrote Conscious Capitalism before, which I also enjoyed very much. Really, the premise is that capitalism does not have to be destructive. It really can be a win for all. We can start to grow into enlightened self-interest. The good of the tribe is the good of us, the good of the business, a win-win-win. I think he calls it a win-win-win-win as his formula of trickle-down awesomeness or leadership. In sum, this is really an argument for empathetic leadership rather than commanding leadership, a flat hierarchy rather than a command and control hierarchy. And these philosophies, the philosophy of servant leadership has been around for 30, 40 years now, but it's always worth a revisit. And it's certainly interesting to check out John Mackey's example and particular thoughts in this thread. I like the book. I recommend it. A book that is particularly near and dear to my heart this year, speaking of servant leaders, is Don't Be a Stranger by Larry Perkins. Larry is not only a former client, but a very, very close family friend of ours, of mine, and of Ryan's. And he has written an epic tome on the power of networking, of paying things forward, and of doing things in the friendliest of all manners. Don't Be a Stranger, his new best-selling book, came out in June of this year, and I can't tell you how many copies of this I have already gifted. I love it. I love the bite-sized chapters. I like the good humor, and I like the relatability and the warmth with which this multimillionaire superstar relays his secrets to success. I hope you pick it up today. I absolutely love this book. And that brings me to only one book that I've loved more this year. The number 1 book of the year. It's going to come as no surprise to those who have been following my lists for quite a while. that it's going to be another history of humankind book. I am an unabashed Yuval Noah Harari fan. I've spoken to you here before about Sapiens and about 21 Lessons for a 21st Century. And now I have a new love. Rutger Bregman, the guy who wrote Humankind, a hopeful history. This is a wonderful history of humankind book that is entirely dedicated to the premise that we are friendly animals, not animosity-driven animals. We are not living in a dog-eat-dog world. We are living in a friendly world. In other words, survival of the friendliest and not survival of the fittest. As a person who peddles positive psychology for a living, I can tell you that I agree with him. One of the hardest things to sell people on is that we're actually in a really friendly universe, that things are really good and always getting better. Though my arguments have, to my mind, been compelling and helped lots of people, I have never seen it stated more plainly, more clearly, and more convincingly than in this book. It was a joy, 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 joy to read. I immediately ran it over to Ryan's side of the bed. And I hope that this isn't the last we hear of Rutger Bregman. I'm pretty sure we'll hear lots and lots more. If you're wondering about that noise, that is Moose, who is always in every single shot. That's it for 2020. Wishing you all a wonderful mindset, always with the help of great books. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you next year.